Okay, so I'm going to talk about the primary options available to you, and those would be shared hosting, VPS, which is virtual private server, dedicated hosting, and then a thing called colo or co-location. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk them through from the kind of the simplest, which are probably the most expensive, going back to the easiest, which are the cheapest, which are probably the ones that beginners will start out using. So I'm going to start with dedicated, and I'm just going to draw a basic computer here. So I'm not going to get any marks for my artistic skills here, but you've got your PC. This dedicated machine is in a data center somewhere, and when you pay for dedicated hosting, you get an entire machine to yourself, and that's yours. And what they do is they provide power and they provide network connectivity, and the hosting company owns the dedicated server that you are using, so you're basically renting it, and what you do is you then have to manage the operating system and everything else. What they usually do is they give you a username and password for a console, which allows you to power on and off the machine, and after that it's totally your own responsibility. Co-location is pretty much exactly the same, with one difference. You actually own the machine, and what you do is you bring your machine to their data center and give it to them, and they plug it in for you. So in co-location, what you're doing is it's like renting a parking space. You're renting the parking space from them, and you put your machine in, and it's totally your responsibility how you manage that. The VPS is actually a slightly different situation. What you have is you have the machine, and what happens here is you've got your web server, and this is a server, and the machine is actually divided up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to divide it here. I'll actually use a different color pen. I'm just going to say, let's pretend this machine is divided up into 4. So I'll just write in the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. So the VPS, it may not actually be 4. It might be 400 if it's a very, very big machine, or it might be 20. What you do with the VPS is you actually have a fixed amount of resources on that machine. So what you can do is you can have, for example, you can have a certain amount of RAM. So let's say the server has 32 gigs of RAM. You may say, well, I want 4 of those gigs. So you've got 4 gigabytes of RAM out of the 32, and what they'll do is they'll say, okay, that leaves us with 28 free. So they have 28 gigs that they can allocate to other people. Now, the advantage of VPS is that it's much cheaper than having a full dedicated server, because the machine is actually getting divided up, but you have a fixed amount of resources. Nobody can eat into that 4 gigs of RAM that are allocated to you. You control that completely. Now, it's called VPS because it's virtual private server, and the reason it's called virtual is because the way that these systems work, what they have is each machine is divided up, and it's actually running a bunch of different operating systems, or VMs, virtual machines. So you might have a machine, and you've got the host controlling operating system, and then you've got a bunch of operating systems owned by different people, which are all within their own little virtual system, their own VM. And each of these machines, these virtual machines, act like a real server, and they can be powered on and powered off virtually. And then they have their own network connectivity. The whole server has its own network connectivity going out. So the advantage of VPS is you almost have a dedicated server. You're completely in control of your environment within there. Now this has its downside as well, because you're completely in control, you have to manage it. You have to update the operating system, you have to install the web server software, you have to install any mail server or database software that you want to use. But it's a great option for when you need some of the power of a dedicated, of your own system. Then finally, the simplest solution is shared hosting. And what these generally are is, these are usually massive machines, and what they do is they have a bunch of websites on them. I'm just going to put them in as dots here. So in shared hosting, what happens is they take a big machine and they fit as many onto it as they can. So they do what the airlines used to do sometimes, which is oversell. So, for example, if I have a shared hosting system and they say that my account is unlimited disk space. There is no such thing as an unlimited hard drive. Let's say the hard drives that they have are 2 terabytes, which is quite big. And one of these users here uses up 1.9 terabytes. Then there's only 0.1 of a terabyte available for everybody else on the system. So that's the problem with shared hosting. There's no ring fencing of resources like in VPS. With shared hosting, you get lucky as to what else is on the server. Now, if one of these shared hosting websites up here, let's say it gets on TV, let's say it gets on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and they get 50 million hits to their website in 5 minutes, that may knock out all of the websites on this machine. The whole machine might go down because it just got too much traffic. Now, what you can do is, if you're on VPS, you find out that you're going to be on TV, you say, hey, don't give me 4 gigs, give me 24 gigs. And what they can do is they can say, okay, we've got 28 free on this machine, so we'll give you 24 of those. Or they might say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take your entire VM and move you onto a new machine that we know is free and that has 24 gigs free. For example, that's how it can work with when you're dealing with massive traffic. So the problem with shared hosting is everybody is living in the same ecosystem and everybody can have an effect on your site. Now the advantage of it is it's very, very cheap because all they've got is they've got one server and they've got 500 to 1,000 sites on it, and most of those sites will be receiving very low traffic, and because of that they're not going to be using up a lot of resources. So it's generally okay for them to put a lot of sites on there. But you can have occasions where one of those websites gets a lot of traffic. Now what you can do is you can actually go with a shared hosting company who claim not to do overselling. So you'll get some, like for example MediaLayer, who we recommend, and what they do is they only sell a certain amount. So for example, they might say on their MediaLayer server, let me just draw it here, what they might do is they might say, well, we're only going to put 16 websites on any one shared hosting server, or 60, or whatever that number is. But they'll say, we'll only give you a space on a server if there's actually resources to match that server. So the shared hosting company that you go with is really important to see, do they do overselling, which is selling more than they actually have available, or are they one of the more expensive operations like MediaLayer who don't do overselling. So that's the kind of the more advanced view of hosting and what the different options are available. Generally people will start out with shared hosting and then they'll graduate from shared hosting. They might start out with shared hosting, for example, with somebody who do overselling like Bluehost or HostGator or one of those, who actually can provide very, very good services, but you just have to be aware that because when you're paying for hosting and you're getting a really, really good price and you're getting unlimited bandwidth and unlimited disk space, that there are actually limitations there in the fine print because you're sharing with everybody else who also has all those unlimited things. And what you may want to do is graduate from that kind of system onto somebody like MediaLayer who don't do overselling, and then maybe consider moving up to VPS, like with VPS.net, who we recommend. And then if you get as far as Dedicated, you won't be using this website anymore because you'll have a whole team of people who are working on your site, and Dedicated is kind of way more advanced, and the same with colocation. But most people who are watching this video will be using either shared or VPS, and if you're looking at VPS, one thing I'd suggest that you look for is a thing called managed VPS, where the company who provide the VPS actually manage the operating system, the SQL database, all that kind of stuff for you, so they set that up for you. So that's kind of a more advanced world of hosting and the options that are available to you.